It's not that office work is hard, it's that it feels like nothing. Welcome back, guys. We're back with our 5th video of the channel. Excited to talk about this topic. We're actually going to do something a bit different today. I wasn't originally planning on discussing this, but I feel like it's something that's resonating with me, especially coming into the weekend and working every day. Just sort of, it's a feeling that I feel a lot. So I thought it would be nice to make video about this, and I'm sure it's a sentiment that a lot of you also feel. And and before I get into that, I'd also just like to say a thanks to the new subscribers we got. We went from around 0 to 6, so yeah, that was great to see. I appreciate it, guys. Anyway, back to the topic of the video: why office work feels so empty. And I'd just like to say before getting into this topic that, currently I do have an office job. Essentially, I handle claims for vehicle repairs. And I'm not just making this video to hate on all office jobs. I've worked physical jobs before. I've worked in warehouses. I've worked in kitchens, that sort of thing. And I would say that I prefer my office job, but it's a different kind of pain, and it's more something that tends to just slowly and repeatedly break you down. With my job, there's not much physical exhaustion, but each day, my mind is just being worn away. And compared to those physical jobs, yes, I would be incredibly tired at the end of the shift. Sometimes just come home and fall straight asleep. But it's almost like I didn't have time to process things. I was moving the whole day, and then I was exhausted, and I would sleep. And although I didn't have much free time, it didn't really matter that much to me. But having an office job is something that I'm able to think about a lot more, especially while I'm at work. So moving on to the first point of the video, and that's that a lot of office jobs, in them, you don't produce something meaningful, right? And what I mean by this is, in a lot of office jobs, what we do is we create spreadsheets, or we analyze data, or we give presentations, and we do calls. And, in reality, those things, they're not real. They're not tangible. You can't really touch them. You can't really feel them. And, if you compare it to, say, the pottery, right? A potterist, or whatever you'd call them. Say you make, a mug to drink your coffee out of, or a vase to put in your living room. It's something that, one, you've used your hands to create, and two, you can now physically see, touch, feel, and smell. There's almost that sense of attachment to the object, right? Now, when you look at a spreadsheet, it's nothing like that. I mean, you've touched the keyboard, but the keyboard isn't the spreadsheet. It's not something that you can really take pride in, if that makes sense. I'm sure a lot of you probably relate to this in some degree or another. I'm not sure I'm wording it as well as perhaps I could, but yeah, it's just the fact of not feeling these things are tangible. And in terms of meaning, I think that it's not only in the things you create at the office, it's also in things like the conversations. A lot of it's just it's small talk, it's meaningless. And I'm not saying every office is like that. I mean, you might be at an office where you're best friends with your coworkers, and you love to talk to them about deep topics. But I feel like for a lot of people in the office, it's this constant small talk of how was the weather, or how was the family, what did you get up to over the weekend? And it doesn't feel like it's information that you really are passionate to talk about. It's almost like just having to adhere to these rigid social norms. And I find that in office work, that kind of thing every day, it almost just wears you down, and makes you feel more and more disconnected from reality. And to a certain extent, it drains you every day, being in that environment when you're almost forced to act as someone that isn't you. Put on this mask, act as maybe as like a robot per se. And I feel like that disconnects from reality, paired with this feeling of not making anything that is deemed tangible or meaningful, that is just, one reason why office work just starts to feel like nothing. On to reason two is that the work that a lot of us do, it feels highly replaceable now. I'm 22, right? My job is fairly entry level. Obviously, if you climb up the ranks, you have more specialized knowledge, or perhaps you studied a specific field. Your job might not be as replaceable. But at the end of the day, and I think for a lot of us, the work that we do does feel highly replaceable, and it's not like we feel, special or valued at our work. On a moment's notice, bosses could replace us if they wanted to. It's almost like we go somewhere and give 8 hours of our life every day, and yet at this place, we're not really relevant, we're not really cared about, and we're forced to adhere to all of these norms that, frankly, we don't really want to adhere to them. So being there every day, just wears down at you, and I'm sure it's not just in office work that those sort of things but I will say, for example, being in a kitchen in one of my past jobs, those social norms don't really exist. Anyone was free to act how they want, and it was more freeing in that way. And that's something that I feel like is a lot harder to find in an office. You're just expected to react normally, to hit targets, meet quotas, that sort of thing. On to point three. I guess this one's going to be a bit of a short one, but it's really the sense of artificial structure. One, you can't really leave if you're in office, midday, but more significantly is the point that, the work we do, it's not necessarily always about productivity or how well we do our job, but really just about structure, hours, adhering to policy, attending pointless meetings. And I feel like that kind of, I'm not sure if I'm using this word right, but that kind of bureaucracy just adds to this sense of meaningless in the office. And, at the end of the day, we come home after doing all of this work and it doesn't really feel like you've accomplished anything, which actually sort of brings me on to my next point slightly, which is that in these kind of jobs, generally, it's often hard to get a clear sense of progression, and this can vary by company. But the main point I'm getting is that, you always, in a lot of these jobs, you always feel busy, constantly doing things, but you're not moving. It's like you're caught in this act of inertia. So it's like you're moving or not moving. Imagine a train is on a track that's going forward, but the track itself is moving backwards. So while the train's moving forward, the track's moving it backwards, and the train is staying stationary. That's almost like what a lot of these jobs feel like. And it's not just in terms of the day-to-day, it's also in terms of promotions and moving up these chains. A lot of these jobs don't necessarily, want to promote a lot of their employees. So you're almost just stuck and, maybe forced to try and job hop. And anyway, I feel like I'm getting a bit off track here, but main point here is that, there's not really a clear sense of progression. Every day's feeling the same, which really just makes it all feel like nothing and just keeps on dulling the mind. And the last point before I end this video is that a lot of us didn't choose the path we're in consciously in terms of office work. And that is to say, I'm sure if any of you guys listening are doing a 9 to 5 in an office, a lot of us didn't consciously choose these jobs that we wanted to end up in. We didn't dream of doing them as a child. Usually I feel like the motivation is either, a big motivation for people is money, another one is just drifting into these jobs. You send an application, or through a friend you get hired, and then once you're in the job you almost feel stuck, but then you also don't want to leave. Everyone also always talks about how good an office job is, so to leave it's almost considered taboo. But to a certain extent, you've got to prioritize your mental health over money, because even at the end, all of that money can begin to feel meaningless if after work you're just exhausted and don't feel any purpose. But yeah, really that's all I was going to talk about today. If you liked the video, I'd really appreciate it if you smash that like button, give a subscribe, and hope some of that might have resonated with you. Thanks.